Hi everyone, happy 20th anniversary to Club Penguin, and thank you for coming in and watching this video. It's probably going to be a long one. I'm just going to go through 20 things that I'm thankful for from the history of Penguin. This is unscripted. I just tried to take some bullet notes to try and keep my brain intact while we go through this. But yeah, I've got a whole bunch of little physical props that I'll try and bring up, and I'll try and show some memories as well as we do this. What I decided to do is this is going to be a chronological list, and that's kind of inspired by one of my favorite books of all time. I've mentioned it before, but this is the Beatles' Ultimate Recording Guide. And what's interesting about this book is it's kind of like, you might know the Beatles anthology. This is my Japanese watch that I'm wearing. It's a Beatles anthology watch, and that's kind of dedicated to the fact that it's all about the Beatles' history, all the stuff that they released, but then all the stuff they didn't release, all of their B-sides and outtakes. And this book here is basically a day-by-day event log of the Beatles. So, you know, it'll go through, it'll be like, okay, February 3rd, what year is this? 1968, the Beatles began recording Lady Madonna, released as a single with the Inner Light on March 15th in the UK and March 18th in the US. It is the most ridiculous book because it's basically just a log of everything they ever did. And to be honest, it's one of my greatest inspirations, despite it having one of the most atrocious covers of all time. But anyways, the Beatles anthology was a huge one, as I was a big music nerd. And so, you know, I was writing and doing a whole bunch of music writing. And what I'm thankful for is that I got to go and do Coachella early on when it was much smaller. And we stayed on the Polo field, just like the name of what ended up being the name of my penguin. I actually was going by Polo Field Online prior to that because this was part of my whole music writing journey. But it was inspired by this field, the very polo field that Coachella actually bought out now. So now Coachella takes place on this polo field down in the Palm Desert in California. And so at the time I was doing a whole bunch of leadership and entrepreneurship coaching. I had a coach that was trying to teach me about business and creating something of your own. Got introduced to the E-Myth Revisited, which is a fantastic entrepreneurship book. I recommend anyone who's interested in entrepreneurship, check it out. It's worth following. But I knew that I needed to take a different direction. The problem was that I had two young kids, right? So my kids, you know, I had my first kid when I was 20 years old. So I say this because I'm so grateful that, like, I'm a schmuck. A lot of what I've learned over my history has been because of my kids. And so I'm just really thankful that I got to do really amazing things despite, you know, my circumstances of where I lived and, you know, my education or my background or anything going into the next year. But I'm just really grateful that my kids started to play with these other kids whose parents worked on Club Penguin. They started working at Club Penguin around this time. And I didn't really think much of it at the time. I didn't know much about it. Oh, they work at a Penguin place. It was just sort of coming up as this thing coming into 2016 and or 2006. Sorry, let's see, old person brain. Anyways, this is my back in the old days. This is my kiddos, my eldest daughter's Rockhopper shirt from back in 2006, back in 2003, 2004. I'm working in this accounting job and I'm just totally miserable. And I'm going to, you know, these prayer groups, and we're praying that I can do something that's much more in my passion, which is, you know, UX or the web. I was doing web design for different clients at the time. And I wanted to be able to do that as a job, right? Which is why I was pursuing getting all this leadership coaching, etc. And I'm super thankful for all that I learned doing accounting, because basically from 2000 to 2005 was just sharpening my Excel knife. So I'm thankful that I could bring that skill into other stuff. And it was pretty much late 2006. Early 2006 is when I started hearing about Penguin. And I didn't put two and two together that I could also potentially have a job there. I think I had just kind of heard about it and dismissed. I wasn't sure. And separately, I had just gotten so burnt out. And luckily, we lived in subsidized housing at the time. So my ex-wife at the time was my wife. She wasn't working and she was taking care of the kids, so I could go and earn an income. But basically, I had a little bit of bookkeeping client work on the side. So I basically made this crazy decision to up and quit. I knew I was super miserable and I needed to do something else. And because I had a little bit of a bookkeeping contract going on, I could do a little bit of that and then see what my next move was. I'm so thankful that worked out. It was one of the dumbest things I've done in my life, actually, because, I had 2 young kids, really had no plan for what I was going to do next. I just had a hope and a prayer, and that was it. Penguin had launched onto Miniclip. And was just doing this crazy, spike in growth. But yeah, it was lucky. Basically, towards the end of the year, I got an interview. So I interviewed with Gizmo. If you've already heard this story, I apologize. But I had a chance to talk to Nathan, aka Gizmo, and at the time they just needed people. There was so many customer support tickets that were coming in for the community, for the community support department. And I think they just needed someone who could, write effectively and could give good customer support. And, for me in the early 2000s, I was working as a front desk supervisor at hotels. So I had already had a bunch of experience in the customer support bucket. And because I didn't really know what I was doing next, I thought, well, I'll demote myself in a way. Like I felt like I was taking a step down, and because previously in the accounting job and bookkeeping, I had my own office and I felt more grown up, even though I was like 27. I wasn't that grown up. Let's be real. So I took it on, and basically I was offered a position on the customer support night team. And I think I was in the night team for basically 2 months. And then flipped over to be working on the day team, and then flipped over from that into working on the billing team. And so I'm actually really thankful that I had that time when I was working in community support. So, receiving phone calls when I was doing billing and trying to understand what people were getting frustrated about, what they were concerned about. Parents from New York who were just very assertive attorneys who were like, my child took my credit card out of the purse and bought this membership. Why are you charging me? And then I'd have to have this conversation with them to be like, well, I'm sorry, no problem. We'll waive that. And it was interesting because, I'd had people that had a much more frustrating experience working in hotels. They were getting charged multiple $100s per night that were less upset than the people who were upset about the $5.95. So it was a cool experience to be able to meet so many of the team, because at the time a bunch of the team was in customer support, right? It was a much smaller development team and a much bigger customer support team or community support. So I'm thankful that I got to meet multiple teams, because I ended up working on the night shift, because we had a day shift and a night shift. And that allowed us to cover basically 16 hours worth of the day to keep up with the volume of customer support tickets. So I'm still thankful for the decision that Lance and Lane and Nathan made. I think I really want to credit Lane here. I don't think he gets enough credit for being the one who made the decision to say, we're going to answer every email with empathy and love and care and excitement, no matter how silly the email may seem to you. And that was really coming in was quite refreshing. It's more the way that I would want to give support to customers anyways. So yeah, because of that, it opened up the opportunity for a lot of young people to have these positions. Within a couple days, I met Lance for the first time. And at the time they were looking for somebody in accounting, and he's like, "Oh, you used to be an accountant. Well, do you want to join the accounting team? Do you want to apply for that?" Absolutely not. No, thanks. I was so burnt out from the accounting position. Just mainly I think you get more burnt out when you're working really hard. You don't know what you're doing, so you have to rack your brain a lot more than if it's something that you're super comfortable with. So I was being stretched in the accounting position, and but also not enjoying the work. I didn't find it fulfilling because it wasn't creative enough for me. I really come from a creative family, so I mean, this is my uncle's band. I got a little pin from my uncle's band. He's been a musician. He would build boats. My father, my grandfather, they were artists. My grandmother was a graphic designer. So my mother was a writer. Like, it's just kind of, for me, I've always wanted to do something creative. So here I got to work on this team that was like super creative. And tons of people were creative. It was nuts. Like, the people that were working in the customer support team were also super creative. Like, some of them were signed to major labels, still are, and putting out albums and touring. So I look at that time and go, wow, I can't believe my luck. I was so blessed and so thankful that I got to work on this. And then I look at when I joined, and it was just such a cool time for what was going on in the game. Because this was right around the time of the Color Party, Rockhopper, the very first mascot visit, the lighthouse had opened, all the crazy growth from being on Miniclip and having all these new people joining the world. And I think what was really cool leading into 2007 is the first half of 2007 is still prior to the Disney acquisition. And one thing I don't know that I've shared a whole lot is that at the time when I was working in accounting, one of my biggest issues was I'd been watching like the corporation documentary and all this stuff about basically social responsibility. And when we had a whole bunch of executives touring through that were from obviously, potential acquirers, right? So you're dating, and these different executives are touring through the studio. The reason why I joined Penguin was because of its philanthropic efforts. So I'd heard that the team had basically donated like a year's worth of diapers to an orphanage in Rwanda, and these different stories of what the team had done to give back to the world. And I thought, well, that is amazing. And probably the number one reason I was like, well, yeah, it's a customer support job, but it sounds really interesting and it's super unique, which is appealing to me and my creative brain. But they are also givers. So for me, I was always like, just at that time, was very cautious about sort of corporate interest. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was concerned that it wasn't going to be as philanthropic anymore. And so when we eventually started doing Coins for Change as well, I'm like, it was awesome because not only was it philanthropic and giving, but it was also the community was involved. So super cool. I just love that. And then I'll share just trinkets as I go through. This is my copy of a book that inspired a certain artist named Chris, a much more talented artist than me. Anyways, you might know this from the Pigpen cipher, which is in here somewhere. But anyways, this kind of leads me to the thing that really got me excited about Club Penguin the most were the PSA missions. So this whole thing about like, oh, there's a story and there's puzzles to solve, and it's like a point and click adventure, sort of like the game that I used to play, Mickey's Space Adventure, which was a Sierra point and click adventure game. Seeing that they were making Sierra style adventures was just wild and incredible. And I'm so thankful that I got to join the team before the Disney acquisition. Like, I'll show this one. This is interesting. I don't know if anybody's seen it, but this is a prototype mug. Other Chris would know this one because there's his art. But this is before the acquisition, the old Penguin logo. But yeah, 2007, like 2006, 2007, there was all this youthful excitement. Like the whole place was just full of this energy for doing awesome things for this excited player base. So the team was as excited to just do fun stuff and write emails and hang out with their friends while they do it. Like it didn't feel like work. People were just excited to be there. And so was I, because I mean, they compare this with showing up and having to do accounting where you're going, okay, here's a house, and you have to go through all the invoices and make sure that you've got them in the spreadsheet to the penny. And I go through all the work, and then it's like, oh, it's 1 penny out. So you would literally have to go, okay, this says 2 cents, this says 3 cents. I can't just go, here's the penny, we're good. I would have to go and fix the work, so you'd have to start from scratch. That's the joy of accounting, is doing things like account reconciliations. And those things made my head want to explode. So it was so great. Like, even when I had the time when I was working in the billing department for about 6 or 7 months, give or take, I took a little break to go down and go to another Coachella, 2007. But that was a time where I got to, like, you know, even when I was taking escalated calls, when it was somebody really, really angry who wants to talk to a manager, and then the manager is out at that moment. And so they're, you know, you have like a 2-hour gap where there's one team leader had left and then another team leader came in. They'd be like, well, this one's really heated. Chris, can you pretend to be the manager? I'd be like, okay. And even when it was like really tense like that and somebody's just really angry about something, like unreasonably angry, it still felt amazing. Because it was like, you know, we're working on this thing that, you know, people just genuinely love. And so anyways, I'm super thankful for that. And then 2007, like, there's the first half where it's like pre-Disney and I'm experiencing all this stuff. I'm starting to see all these executives come in. And eventually then, of course, the news, like, I transition, I get a position on the development team. And so now I'm moved away from doing customer support to now I'm doing more like editorial and writing. And it was just before like the Disney acquisition. And you knew that something was kind of going to happen. But then when, you know, August 1st rolls around, I tell you, I could not be more thankful for who the guys chose to sell the company to. I know there's a whole lot of sort of community disdain for things that are like, oh, blaming this faceless entity, Disney, for things. I think it's ridiculous. There's so many more things going on than just some, oh, it's a company, blame that. Disney was amazing. And to be honest, like, there's so many people I would never have met had it not been for being at Disney. You know, my dad many years ago was a finalist to be an animator at Disney. So I had always had this childhood dream of one day, maybe I'll get to work there. Maybe I'll get to work at Disney. And so, in fact, I think I even said that in my interview, to move out of support and over to like this editorial writing role. I think I'd said about this story that I always wanted to work at Disney. And I think like Lance kind of just like smiled and chuckled a little bit to himself. Anyway, so I was very, very fortunate that I got to join the team. And then we whole team, we went down to Disneyland and had a good time there. Got to tour the studio lot, which was a huge dream for me because I'm all about the behind the scenes, right? So I love the act of creating stuff. I don't know if you're like this, but to me, what's interesting about the Beatles anthology is that it is, it's how the sausage was made. You know, you have this award-winning creative team who's made all kinds of amazing stuff, and you get to see how it was made, where they fought and where they got over fighting each other and all this stuff. And it was just so unbelievably cool to now be on the inside and then get to walk around the studio a lot and see, oh, this is where they, you know, this is the first animation house over there. And here's Walt's office, right? Like, seeing Walt's office was super cool because, again, I grew up watching a whole bunch of Disney stuff. I used to come home every lunch hour and watch DuckTales. Like, DuckTales was one of my absolute favorite shows when I was a kid. And yeah, to be there was just unbelievable. So I'm so grateful out of anybody that they could have chosen that we did choose Disney. Like, how awesome was that? And 2007 was also really brutal. It was strange to say, but because this is a gratefulness talk. But the end of 2007 is when I lost my grandmother who raised me. And she, I think, had been very secretly dying of cancer and didn't tell anybody. So she passed away at the end of December in 2007. So really, it's like Disney acquisition, grandmother dies, and then the we have one car that we just bought, and 2 weeks later the engine explodes. So it was just this really bizarre time where like it was like high highs and low lows. Like it was brutal because the car engine was going to cost us another $4,000 of money I did not have. And the team, bless them, were so kind, so generous. They wrote us this beautiful card and gave us like some money towards trying to fix the engine or get a new vehicle. And yeah, I'm so grateful that the team did that for us, for my ex-wife and I, for my kids, because it was painful. I just lost my grandmother. Now I lost the car. I'm going to have to, like, I guess, bus to work or something. It was not a fun time at the end of 2007. Yeah, anyways, it was interesting, but I'm very thankful because, like, you know, right around the time that she passed was when I was working on writing Squidzoid versus Shadow Guy and Gamma Gal, which, fun fact, my eldest daughter still holds it against me, but I tried to basically make the two sort of fictional within fiction characters based on my two daughters. My youngest at the time, my second daughter, was obsessed with pink. She wanted a pink room with everything pink. So that's why I started with the pink character, and I was like, well, if I'm doing a pink character and I'm going to make this a very pink superhero, I need to like sort of counterbalance that with like more of a male superhero outfit. Because again, this is obviously way before we ever did anything with Marvel for you guys, for the community. So yeah, I kind of basically had to leave that story just kind of sitting there. And the great thing is, like, Cody came in and just did such a bang-up job with it. He made it way better than I would have made it. I made junk like, you know, I wrote stupid stuff like the caveman one where they're all just saying, ugh, ugh, grub, grubba, grubba, and running around because I thought it was funny. It was actually inspired, by the way, that script was inspired by the fact that a lot of players would walk into the middle of the stage and just start spamming only the first page of the script. So I wanted to do a story where the first page was just nonsense so that when anybody came into the room who didn't know what the stage was, it would be hilarious to see all these like cave penguins going like grub, grub, ooga, ooga, ooga. I don't know. Anyways, it was a dumb joke, but I'm thankful that you would forgive me for my idiocy. Hopefully other stuff made up for it. But anyways, yeah, so going into 2008, man, this is where the whirlwind begins because we've joined the Disney team. And one of the things that I say as soon as this happens, as soon as the acquisition is announced, I'm like, this is crazy. Like, you got to remember, Club Penguin was made in this small town in the middle of nowhere in Canada, right? So it's a 4.5 hour drive between Vancouver and here, depending on if you're going the speed limit or not, and if it's snowy. And it's like 8 hours to drive to Calgary, and it's like, you know, 8 hours to get to Seattle. Like, it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it's really mountainous to get to, so in the winter it's kind of hard to get to. So you got to remember, I'm like, this is wild, this is crazy, this is too bizarre a story that Disney has acquired this company and acquired this property, and the fact that there's so many people playing this game and it was made here, we've got to preserve this story. So that's actually where I started, where I said, hey, we should start an archives, right? So I started this thing called the Archive Dumpster, and it was basically just a great big folder, and I said, everybody in the art team, if you got any sketches or whatever, any napkins, I became known as the napkin collector. That was Nicole's pet name for me. It was like, there's the napkin collector again. I was like, put whatever sketches, anything in this folder. And that's where we started the Club Penguin Archives. The whole concept of, you know, maybe in the future, one day, this game will be significant enough that we'll want to make a documentary, a book, or, you know, a film, or a coffee table book, or who knows what, right? And to be honest, it's an idea that I still haven't really let go of. I hope that's okay with everyone. I just think I love video game history. Again, I've shared about, you know, the Beatles anthology. It's on my wrist. I think Club Penguin was a really key game. And so 2008, on the backs of this archival initiative, this is when I started building Ice. So Ice was initially an internal dev wiki that we had that was only available to like the people who are working on art and code. The support team actually didn't have access to the wiki. So there was no like, when did this come out? And so, you know, players like yourselves would write in and they would say, when did this come out? Where was this? And they'd be asking for different facts and lore questions. Like all that stuff was going on right from the beginning, that, kids wanted to ask stuff. And a lot of times it was frustrating because you couldn't find an answer. It was really difficult to be like, where is this? So that's when I started kind of separating the stuff that's like sensitive, like code, right? Code, logic, the filter. I started separating that stuff, so that stayed in the dev wiki, and then started building Ice, which is where we would put lore and all the rest of it. And so I'm super thankful I got the opportunity to do that. And it was during that time, I remember, you know, Bob Iger came up and he toured through the studio, and he was walking through and he's meeting everybody, and then, you know, have a little moment. He comes over to our corner, and there's like 4 of us over there, and he's just asking questions. He's asking good questions, which he does. He's a great leader. And I remember he's like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, all right. He's like, what do you write? I was like, I just remember freezing up because I'm like, words. This is a terrible moment. I was free, and they're like, no, this way, Bob. Let's go over here. So thankfully, like, Jin and the team just kind of, you know, kept him going through the tour of the rest of the studio. Went, whew, anyways, because we just started the archives, we went, a little group of us flew down to LA or Glendale, so the whole, you know, Southern California area. And I had some meetings with some of the different archivists at Disney, which was awesome. And the guy from the photo archives, he toured me through the dark archives, and we're looking through, like, you know, photos from all the film sets, which was awesome. We looked at a bunch of Walt Disney's acting career. I'm not sure if you know this, but he, for a short time, he was doing some acting roles. So he was actually starring in Hollywood films. So we were looking at all those. And yeah, but of that, I also got to meet Dave Smith. Dave Smith, if you don't know, he's no longer with us, but super nice man. And he was hired by Walt himself to start the Disney archives. And so it was super nerve-wracking, and I just don't feel like I asked the best questions, but I did ask stuff. We talked about the Dewey Decimal System. We looked at a bunch of like 1930s Mickey Mouse toothbrushes and stuff. And the reality is, if we had have gotten purchased by another company, say like, you know, Sony or something, you know, the reality is maybe it wouldn't have been quite the same. You know, like the beautiful thing about Disney was, you know, it was more aligned with us. So again, I'm super thankful for that. On that trip though, I had way too much sake and really nice dinner. But man alive, it was just, we're all feeling pretty ill on the flight back. I mean, Lane and I were like, oh. But we had a great time. It was fantastic, and I'm super thankful. But that was the beginning of 2008, and it's sort of the Japanese theme. I'm mentioning it because, you know, to be honest, Japanese game history is a super deep passion of mine. I've been studying the history of Koei Tecmo for the last, 10 years, actually, because there's a whole bunch I didn't know about them before. And it is a huge inspiration for me. Legend of the Mystical Ninja, for example, is a huge inspiration. Samurai Pizza Cats is a huge inspiration. I'm so excited about that game coming out. So when later in the year, it was basically Lance announced to the team, hey, we're going to finally do ninjas. And better yet, we're going to make it a trading card game. That was the most amazing news ever. So Lance had been working on this game design, and we had to figure out how are we going to debut the ninjas? How are ninjas going to show up for the community? And the amazing stuff was there was so much lore with the community, right? So I've heard these Will Wright interviews where he talks about the best games. You kind of fill in the blanks. Like it's you remove a bunch of elements, and then the human mind fills in the rest. And I think with Club Penguin, that really applies, because half of the game was the game. The other half was the community. It was meetups at the party, right? It was going to igloo parties. And the greatest thing to me about Penguin was the sort of hip hop call and response. And what I mean by that is when I say, hey, you say, ho, hey, anyways, excuse my boomerism, but I'm old, whatever. What was cool is we would come out with something and then the community would interpret it this totally different way, right? And so with ninjas, because it had been teased as this costume item, because Lance loves ninjas, ninjas are cool, just like I love ninjas. So it got teased many, many years before. It'd been 3 to 4 years worth of buildup, maybe 5, maybe 6. All these years worth of buildup towards this moment of ninjas. When are we finally going to get to turn invisible and become a ninja? And so what was amazing was being able to like bring that to life, because there was all these rumors on the Miniclip forums. This is, I'd been on the Miniclip forums as a moderator. The debut of Polo Field around summer 2007 that, it became one of the staff members known on that forum. And on there was a whole bunch of different threads that people were like, oh, I saw ninjas here, I saw ninjas there. And you had great YouTube videos starting to come out because YouTube was growing in popularity. And all of a sudden you had all these like, well, if you stand in the dojo for 7 hours and do this, and it's like, well, you can't because you get auto disconnected after 10 minutes of being idle. And yeah, so anyways, we ended up like being able to bring all that stuff into this amazing experience, but also added all the stuff that we wanted to do. Like, I was super lucky that I got to sit down. I think I did it like overnight, one night years ago. I wish I still had the document, but I just wrote out like, this is kind of what Sensei would be like. He'd be this character who shows up as this mysterious character. Will basically have this cool lightning strike during the Halloween party. And then because the lightning strikes, it hits the dojo. And then a hole is in the dojo roof. And then when you're like, wait a second, we got to go to the roof and find out why the dojo, got broken. Actually, I'll bring the dojo out and I'll show it. So I've got a prop while I talk about this. I happen to have a dojo here. It's kind of fun. So this will be a reward if you stuck around for long enough. Here's the dojo. I don't know if you can see it, hopefully. But yeah, we had it so that, lightning strikes the dojo. And so you had to go, outside. And then when you go outside, you're like, wait a second, there's some random penguin that's gray out there. There'd been no gray penguins at the time. And so now all of a sudden there's this gray penguin for the first time, and he's sitting there with a shovel. And the thing I really wanted was something inspired by Japanese role-playing games, which is when you meet a character for the first time, their name is not displayed and it just has question marks. And it's such an obvious thing if you play games, but there were a bunch of the team who weren't really diehard like JRPG players, for example. And so they'd be like, what are you talking about? Why is this question marks? The kids are going to be confused. And it's like, no, we need to do question marks. I remember we were just fighting so hard. I was like, you have to do the question marks. I was very forceful about it. I'm like, we have to do this because it's way too fun. And I'm so glad we did because it really made Sensei feel so much more significant when he came out. Well, the cool thing was, I got to work on the first set. So basically I had to build a spreadsheet of like, here's the cards we're going to do. And I had to pick the cards based on the art we had available. We didn't have any art. Like we had art, but not a lot of it. So I had to go through like every flash file and go, okay, well, there's an illustration on the cover of the issue of Penguin Style. Okay, so that could be this card. And it was really an exercise in scraping the bottom of the barrel in a way. Not in a bad way, but we just didn't have a lot of art already done that we could reuse. And it's not cheap. Like if you're paying someone per hour to illustrate, it takes some time to do new art. And we already were just completely slammed with all the stuff we wanted to build for the virtual world itself. So we didn't want to add more work to the artist's plate to go, okay, can you now go and do other illustrations where you're drawing the art for 200 cards or whatever, right? So we had to go and use what we already had. And so that's why the first set, if you look through it, I think is super interesting. Obviously I'm biased, but what's interesting about it is that it's not the biggest, most major stuff. Like it goes through all these like little weird moments in Penguin, and it shows the patchwork quilt of the community and how patchworky the world was, you know? And yeah. It was also like one of my favorite memories because we were working on this. So I think if we didn't get acquired by Disney, maybe we wouldn't have gone and made a game as quickly. So this was the first ES game. And one of my fondest memories I'm so thankful for was basically we had been given a build, and the writing team, because at the time I wasn't managing, I was just one of the other writers, just like Cody and Deanna and Emma all were. So while Emma was here from the UK, we got given a build, and we're like, hey, can you review the script? You have 24 hours. So for us, we're like, 24 hours? That's no time. We got to read this thing and go through the whole game in 24 hours. And anyways, we got a spreadsheet, and we went through the whole thing. 3 of us, so it was like me, Emma, and Cody, and we literally stayed up all night. We were in the office working on this, and we basically just rewrote the entire script. Now I say rewrote, it's not like you can change the structure. Like if you're a writer, you'll know that you'll have a story structure. You can't just blow that up. So anyways, we had to follow the structure that was already there. But we did it. Some of our lines, the team down in Glendale or whatever, QA'd it out of existence. So we lost some of our funny jokes. Like we had this one line in there where, you know, in the game, spoiler alert, if you haven't played it, go play it. It's cheap. You can find it on eBay. But we had this moment where Gary loses his memory, and then suddenly Gary comes back, and he's magically got his memory back. And we just thought it was so funny. We're like, wow. And we were like, sounds like a plot device. So we literally put that in as one of the responses. We're like, sounds like a plot device. And we loved it. We thought it was hilarious. Somebody else in the team didn't love it, and it got removed. So it didn't end up in the final product, which is too bad. But yeah, anyways, 2008 was wild. But it's also interesting because it overlaps with other games. Like, so this game, I think, is very similar to Penguin in a way. It's a similar spirit. It's, you know, if you played Animal Crossing, obviously, you know, it's like you go and you do your daily life. It's a life simulator. It's cozy. It's not high intensity. So I think it's a really interesting, I think Penguin and Animal Crossing have a lot of shared DNA accidentally. Just thought I'd mention that. So now going into 2009, this is an interesting time because, you know, we were really like Cardjitsu Fire was the next game, right? So Cardjitsu was a big deal. We were going to do new cards. And so we needed to get basically like some sort of story plan for how Cardjitsu Fire would appear. The problem is the Cardjitsu Fire game kept getting delayed and delayed because of all the bugs QA kept finding. So it's just bug after bug after bug, and it just kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed. And meanwhile, nobody was really super happy with the story that we were coming up with for it. Like, we didn't really have a story that was just like working for folks. And it basically, I think it just came down to the last minute where like, we don't have much time. We've got to do some sort of party to lead up to Cardjitsu Fire. And so that's where it was basically some all-nighter I pulled where I'm like, well, what if it was inspired by the forest fires that happened in Kelowna? This was 2009, so it was basically like, you know, 5 or 6 years after the big forest fires. So it was right around the same time. It was August when the fires happened, and it was August when we were working on the story in 2009 leading up to this. What was interesting about that is like when you have a forest fire and everything's on fire, like if you've ever experienced this or seen videos, it's crazy scary. Like the entire mountain is on fire and the entire sky turns orange. And so I think if we didn't have that real life experience, that probably wouldn't have been the story lead up to Cardjitsu Fire. And to be honest, I think it's great that we ended up there. We ended up with the orange sky, even though it was kind of like the sky turns orange, and then we had to delay Cardjitsu Fire, so we couldn't end that party on here's Cardjitsu Fire. We had to like end the party, return back to like regular Club Penguin, wait a little while, and then ta-da, here's Cardjitsu Fire. So it was a little disjointed. That's okay. We got a new game. That was cool. And yeah, it was cool, like basically getting there and going, okay, now you can look back on history and go, hey, there was this moment in the place where Club Penguin was made that influenced Club Penguin. And I love that overlap. I think that's really special. Two other things that I'm super grateful for is my team. By this time, I was managing the writing team, and I love the way the writing team bounced around cadence. So basically, Cody was kind of leading that one, but we would all bounce in the room. So we would talk through ideas. Deanna would give him some feedback, and he would totally improve what he had. I think cadence is awesome. I still have a heavy bias towards cadence, again, being a music fan. But I also have a heavy bias towards the Festival of Flight. I think that out of all the parties that are out there, I got to agree with J-Dan. Like, it is one of the most interesting, unique, and unexpected parties. I think Club Penguin was at its best when you were surprised. You didn't expect an earthquake to happen and an earthquake happened, or you didn't expect the sky to turn orange or this character to get kidnapped. Those were the best moments and the ones that I was, super proud of. But what's so cool is this, like, again, I had a kid when I was 20, right? And so at the time that all this was going on, it was so great for my daughter because she was basically the prime age for Club Penguin, right? This was a time like Penguin gets acquired right at the time when she is at peak Club Penguin playing age, because really on average it was like 7 to 9 years old was the main sweet spot at the time for Penguin. And so because of that, like, this was the time that was her peak Club Penguin time. And so that's something that I'll kind of always be sort of biased towards, is that this was the time when she was most passionate about the game. And it was so cute and sweet because at the time, like when kids grow up, they're less, they're not proud of anything. Oh yeah, dad. Oh, I'm going to be around my dad. When you become a teenager, you're like, ugh. We all go through it. And so this was the time where, my daughter was so proud because, all the kids at school were playing Club Penguin, and she's like, well, guess what? My dad works at Club Penguin. So she got to do the, like, my uncle works at Nintendo kind of story that I had when I grew up, right? Everyone's like, oh, my uncle worked at Nintendo. So, the cool thing is my daughter got to experience that. She got to have that story of like, my dad works at Club Penguin. Isn't that cool? I'm so happy that she got to have that experience. And I used to do whatever I could to bring any of her ideas into Penguin. So whenever there was play testing, I'd get her in for play testing. When she would draw stuff and I'd bring it in, I'd feature it on social later. All the way along, I was always trying to get my two daughters' stuff into Penguin. I was always going, okay, here's a kid's opinion. What does another kid think of this, right? And I would see if the players from the public would agree, right? So we would kind of have the kids we knew locally, right? And we would do play tests with them, bring them into the studio, and we would do these tours, right? And so we would ask questions about, hey, there's some of the ideas that we're exploring. What do you think of this? And yeah, that was a super cool time because, we'd bring that in. But it was also a very stressful time. This was when we were starting to do more and more localization, and it was really tough, right? So 2009 was, things were ramping up so fast. We were all getting kind of like whiplash from all the stuff going on. But then it really ramps up in the year that basically Penguin kind of in a way peaks. Like Penguin, in terms of like player count and everything, like 2010 is kind of the peak. Because remember, after this, you start to get like Minecraft, the App Store, Roblox. Part of their investment thesis was to let players make their own Club Penguins, basically. Like, Club Penguin was clearly part of the Roblox thinking. You can see Club Penguin in Roblox's DNA today. But 2010 was kind of this peak, and, there was so much going on, and we had so many ideas, and there were so many people. It was just chaotic. So this was the year where everything was kind of going, like, just all over the show. And for me, I realized that I was falling in love with someone on my team. And so I knew I had to go and make another department. I had to go and I had to quit, basically, and create something new. And so, I'm so grateful that, people like Nicole and Stuart. Nicole is amazing. Wish more of the community knew how amazing Nicole is. She allowed me to start this new department. And I was like, well, I'm going to need a video editor. And they're like, well, what about, this guy Johnny, Nathan says. He's like, this Johnny Moose guy is really great. And I was like, fantastic, let's go. And so I'm so grateful that, like if there hadn't been a Disney, I wouldn't have met the love of my life. And I'm thankful that people around me, like it took a while, like for people to get used to the idea that's like, I'm in this relationship. But yeah, like over time, it just basically is like this. And this is also a time when it's like, things were whiteboard leaked, right? So this was the big whiteboard leak where, our entire whiteboard for the entire year of 2011, somebody had taken a photograph of it, and someone who was just really watching everything like a hawk found this whiteboard photo. And because the whiteboard photo leaked at the very end of 2010, that kind of leads into more community opportunity, right? So yeah, I'm super thankful that whiteboard leaked, actually, because on it had this word that said blackout. Now, at the time, it was because I was saying things were getting crazy, and they were, because we were adding more and more and more and more and more features on top of this code base that was kind of getting brittle. Like, things were kind of falling apart at the seams. Like, it felt like things were hanging on by a thread to keep the service live, and we were bringing in all these DevOps and engineers, and the client was breaking over here, and then people were trying to like hack into stuff over there, so we had to make sure that we were salting stuff, and it was crazy. And yeah, so anyways, because of this time where there's so much going on, and literally the engineering team, they needed a break. So we had put in like, it was like 2 weeks of like blackout. That means we're not going to do any more features. We're not going to build anything. We're not going to build anything new. And because of that, two things happened. It wasn't just that it led to Operation Blackout, which I'll get into in a minute. It also kind of led to this interesting side effect where we had a whole bunch of these ideas at the time that just never launched. So we had this whole welcome experience with the new tour guide room, like the welcome room, the welcome center. There's going to be like a hot air balloon or an airship ride to tour around the island. We have that. There was another thing that had started getting concepted around this 2010, 2011 time that some people have called like, oh, this was the pirate experience, or the whatever. I can't remember what people have said about it, but that was meant to be this whole job system where basically you would take on a job, any of the things that you saw in Penguin style. Penguins at work. You'd be like construction worker, or police officer, or firefighter, or pirate. And you'd have these jobs, and then you would get to go and do these experiences based on the job you had. But it was quite an advanced idea. Like, it would need a lot of work. It would have been the kind of thing we would have to stop everything to do just that. And we also had all this other stuff. We had to get all the parties done. We had to get, we were doing so much that it was like, we can't. We just can't. We don't have the resource. We don't have enough people. This is too brittle. Things are falling apart. We need to rebuild some stuff. We need to fix bugs. So the whiteboard leak, kind of the blackout thing, it's kind of both. So a whole bunch of these ideas, because they were too big in scope, we just didn't do them. The book room revamp, that was another one. I wanted to revamp it to be more like a modern coffee shop, music shop, because a lot of bookstores had changed. They weren't just bookstores anymore. Suddenly you had music and a coffee shop. It was kind of a mixed environment. And so that's what I wanted to do, was revamp the book room into being like, you could also collect music. And it's something we never did. And I'm actually kind of thankful, because it means that in the future we can take that into other experiences, which is good, I think. But then 2011 comes around, and I think the most interesting thing for me and most exciting thing was we're making all these great videos and everything, but Beta Team. Beta Team was this bizarre hidden thing where the only way you could initially get to it was through a link in the blog. And it wasn't just anywhere, it was just, we put it into one blog post. This is how we launched it. We didn't tell anybody. We put it in one blog post, and we made a hyperlink on the word team at the end of one blog post. And if you clicked that link, it would drop a cookie that said, okay, you can visit the site. If you tried to go directly to the URL, it wouldn't work because you didn't have the cookie. You had to get there from this link. And we wanted it to feel like you'd kind of like hacked into the Matrix or something. Like you got there and it was like, what is this experience I found? And it looks like a terminal. And it's like, it's like this sort of 2-frame, 3-frame animation loads that's like ASCII art of the penguin. And then when you log in with your Penguin account, it shows you a list of these like Flash experiences. And this is where we launched like Rollerscape, which became Pufflescape. A whole bunch of different test games that we'd done with the learning team, and Fluffy the Fish. So Fluffy the Fish was cool because it was another game by the guy, Aaron, who'd made, Pizzatron 3000, super talented game designer. And, the great thing about Beta Team was it had a feedback forum. So, I would launch stuff on a Beta Team, and then people would find out, they'd play it, and then at the bottom you could send in feedback. But it wasn't like it wasn't like YouTube where you leave your comment and everybody sees it, because there's something different about private feedback, right? So I'm thankful we made it private feedback, because what it meant was we could get like a rating back, and so people could score out of 5 stars, and they could also leave a comment, but the comment would only go to us. It wouldn't get published publicly. It was just feedback for us as a team. And the great thing is I could bring it right to the game dev, and I'd be like, here you go, Aaron, here's all the feedback about Fluffy the Fish. Sure enough, he'd go through and he'd find all the stuff, he'd find suggestions and be like, okay, perfect, and he would do all the improvements to Fluffy the Fish. At this time, the team was so big, it was often you would get sort of summarized feedback. You wouldn't necessarily get super specific, like this specific thing is frustrating, or I got stuck here. Like all the stuff that you kind of need more specifics about with playtests. So that was awesome, because then Fluffy the Fish got to iterate, and it's kind of sad that ultimately we never got that game out the door. I don't know that it would be like the biggest game in the world or anything on Penguin, but it certainly was exciting to see the community involvement more directly influencing things in a new way. So I loved that it was pushing things to be much more community centric that way. And yeah, I'm also thankful I got to hire so many amazing people. I made mistakes like picking, this role needs a certain kind of person, and I didn't necessarily pick the right person for that job. But, this is every hiring manager always goes through this experience of you pick someone and you've got a role that you need them to fulfill. It's not quite a fit. Then you got other people where it's like, well, this is the role, but that's nothing compared to how amazing this person is, right? And that's the dream. You want to find someone who's like just grows out of the job and goes way bigger than you ever would have dreamed. So I'm super thankful, and I'm thankful that there was the grace for my mistakes, because I made so many mistakes. It doesn't mean that I'm like perfect, and it doesn't mean that I'm totally imperfect. I have some good ideas and I have some bad ideas, and I'm thankful that people had the grace with my bad ideas. This leads into 2012. So 2012, I think, is peak Club Penguin's creativity. I think this is, if I was writing a story about Penguin, this is kind of like the penultimate Penguin. This is the climax. This is like the best of Penguin. In a way, I think Operation Blackout almost makes for the best like conclusion of Club Penguin, because in a way it's awesome, because it's community involvement, right? It's community plus the team, because there was stuff that we contributed and the community contributed. Like, it's not just, well, here's a list of things the community wants, do that exact list. No, there was call and response, right? There was a suggestion. It's like, oh, that actually overlaps with an idea that we had. Oh, for some other party, let's bring that over to here. So I think Operation Blackout really sums that up. And I've done a video before on Operation Blackout, which I've re-uploaded to this new channel. Well, this channel's been around for a while, but I thought I'm going to put this in one home base. It's just going to be the stuff about Penguin and virtual worlds and Party Parrot and all the stuff that I think about, right? So the history of virtual worlds before Penguin, during Penguin, and after Penguin. That's what this channel is going to be. Yeah, so this was an interesting time because, actually the numbers were declining. Like 2011, I think, was kind of, a little bit of a weaker year for us. There was so much brokenness around like the tech and everything that we were kind of just trying to hold it together in a way, it felt. 2011 was like paving the way for 2012. We had all these ideas for what we could do with the whole spy arc with PSA and EPF. So I'm thankful we kind of blew up the PSA and then just left it to go, oh, I wonder what's going to happen next, right? That was intriguing. I'm also thankful that, at the time when Johnny was working on proving himself, he wanted to prove that he was an amazing video editor. So he had this opportunity to make a video specifically, exclusively for the tours. And that video was this behind the scenes video, which my better half is in. And I like it because I get to see her and I get to see other people that I love, like Corey, who is just one of the most amazing humans on planet Earth. He's over at Epic. Write it in the same way and call it Operation Blackout, right? Or Blackout or Mission Blackout. I think he came up with the Operation Blackout. Doesn't matter. Or maybe the community did. I don't remember at this time. Memories are fading. But during this moment, it was like, okay, let's just sneak that in. I said, oh, I show some of the artwork of the characters we've been thinking about that we haven't shown anywhere yet. So just put them there so that it's more subtle, right? It'll be in there, and then it'll be this exclusive thing for the tours. And then Johnny finishes the video, and it's exclusive for the tours. I'm like, this video is far too good, right? And at the time, after that, we had started doing the YouTube channel as the Happy 77 YouTube channel. And we didn't really expect that that would take off as quickly and go as big as it did. And so because of that huge surprise of how popular that Happy 77 channel was, it was like, okay, well, we should probably do the proper Club Penguin channel, right? Because then the marketing team can be running ads from that channel. We can be putting up all of our sneak peek videos onto that channel. But I needed some content for the channel that would be great, that people would want to see, that they hadn't seen before. And it just so happened that Johnny had made this amazing tour video. And I just said to Billy Bob, I'm like, hey, Billy Bob, don't you think that this video is far too good to leave it just as an exclusive? And he's like, yeah. So basically we kind of just snuck that out the door and was like, ta-da, here's the new Club Penguin YouTube channel. And there's that video, which happens to have this shot of Operation Blackout. I think if we hadn't done the 1-2 punch of like the whiteboard leaks, the community totally responds to Operation Blackout, and then we kind of sneak this other one out the door. If we didn't have all of that, it probably wouldn't have paved the way for 2012's Operation Blackout. But what was so cool about Blackout is the entire team was in sync. There's certain moments in our history, like Ruby and the Ruby was like that, Card-Jitsu was like that, where we were firing on all cylinders. Everyone you would talk to would be on the same page. There wasn't a lot of disagreements or arguing. It was just, here's what we're going to do, bang. And everybody was just building on the other person's ideas. So that to me is still a highlight. But 2012 also had, like, you know, Moose and I made that the commercial, right? So we made a commercial, and that's how we got to debut the announcement of the Marvel takeover. So bringing Spider-Man in, like, again, I'm a Spider-Man collector, or used to be. Like, this is one of my favorite Spider-Man covers years ago. Love this cover. So as like a kid, I used to collect Spider-Man. So man, seeing Spider-Man come into Club Penguin was just chef's kiss, most amazing moment. I'm so thankful we got to do that. Such peak, right? And the party was just fun. You know, blowing stuff up. That was fun. Yeah, and the community liked it. And it was fun that it was like debuting on TV, right? Like that was fun that we got to put this ad up, and we got to use O Fortuna, which was just this ridiculous piece of music. I thought that's peak irony, where you have this gameplay footage, but then it's set to the most over-the-top piece of music you could possibly choose. I loved that. And yeah, on the video side, we were, you know, Moose and I wanted to beat Moshi Monsters or Moshi Monsters. Like the Moshi Monsters YouTube channel at that time was outstanding. Like it was amazing. They were doing great music videos. They were doing great content. And so we had a chip on our shoulder. We wanted to outdo them, right? And so that's where I see positive competition, right? Where we're like, we want to do a better video than you guys because we admire what you're doing so much. We want to make great stuff that catches attention like that. And I think without that like little impetus, like 2012 was just so peak. Like the medieval party was amazing. All the colors and the painting that the art team did for the environments. The Scorn Dragon battle was awesome. It's the first time you had a sword. We finally had a new game with Smoothie Smash. Like we did the Innocent Smoothies partnership in the UK, and the Temple of Fruit party was fantastic. It was great. The team was just firing on all cylinders. We'd come out of like, there wasn't as much going on in the game. Like we had sort of ordinary parties, I would say, in a way. Like, yeah, there were some highlights in 2011, but man, 2012 just, it was so strong. And yeah, so I'm just super thankful. And also because this was leading up to the time when we were about to debut the Club Penguin mobile app. We'd been fighting through this. We've got to get off of Flash. We got to get moved over to the new technology. And man alive, like, it was like, that was such a huge amount of work. That's going on for years, right? So it'd been multiple years of rebuilding Penguin for the mobile app. And yeah, you guys have no idea what a fight it was, what a battle it was to get to that moment of like, here it is. Club Penguin's finally on your iPad and your iPhone. Fantastic. That was a huge, huge conversation for another day, let's just say. And so the cool thing is, as part of that, I was like, okay, you know what I'd really like to do is I'd like to sit down with the team. Some of the team were moving away. They had like quit their job, found a new opportunity, or they wanted to change their life and did something totally different. There were so many people that were kind of like leaving, and they were moving away from Kelowna. So I wanted to take that opportunity with Moose, where we just went and interviewed a whole bunch of people. So my plan was, let's make a behind the scenes. And I was like, this is the moment. And so he gave me an inch and I ran a mile. I was like, okay, perfect. Here we go. I can finally get back to the archives and I can finally work on the Club Penguin documentary. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do this as a behind the scenes video, but we're going to just go and interview and get as much interview content as we could. So we got Lane, Lance, Dave, Chris, Hendrix, Heatherly, Happy 77, like with the real Happy. We got all these people lined up to go. We're going to get all these interviews and we're going to make the Penguin documentary. This is our moment. This is the time to do it, is now. I remember, you know, Lane telling me, he's like, you got to do this now. There won't be another chance. And I was like, okay. So we're just fighting to get that stuff. And so I'm super thankful that all of that footage that was captured, you know, and interestingly enough, it had actually gone missing. Like all that content had gone missing. The hard drive, don't know where it is, somewhere in the Kelowna studio. But luckily there was a backup on a hard drive that had corrupted. And so because the hard drive had corrupted, you know, just thought it was ordinary files and go to recover it. And it's like, there's the footage. So it was like this near death experience, because we actually had footage for that documentary of like, you know, the moment where Happy 77, the real Happy, asks, well, who's Happy 77 now? Right? We get to sheepish. So we have that on camera of seeing her reaction to that. Like there's a whole bunch of just gold in that story. The one day I hope we can see the light of day. You know what I mean? But we also had like, we filmed a launch night of the big new feature was Igloo Likes. And I think that was 2011 or 2012. Anyways, that was a massive feature, a massive amount of work. And also, I think, a really cool community feature, because suddenly now you could remove the igloo and then only have a nice wide landscape to decorate. So you basically now, for the first time, had like all this stuff you could decorate. How awesome was that, right? And so, yeah, all that footage was like saved. One day, hopefully, I can see the light of day. Yeah, but that leads to 2013. And this is an interesting time because basically Moose, like a bunch of the other folks that I'd worked with, left. And then they had started going and working on this new project. They started working on this thing called Mech Mice at a totally different studio that, you know, the Penguin creator had made. So here you have Lance's new game studio. He's now doing something totally different. He's going back to like, he wants to make the strategic war game that he always wanted to make. And it was kind of like, I remember at the time, I was really sad because I'm like, all the cool kids got picked. Yeah, it makes sense that I wasn't picked. Not in the cool kid group. Okay. I remember that. It was just such a bummer because like all these amazingly talented people like, you know, Kale and Chris Hendricks, like all these folks went over and started working on Mech Mice. And I remember you just watched from afar, like, looks pretty fun over there. We're having a lot of pain going on right here where things are falling apart with Penguin, and you know, it was a stressful time. So, but we were also doing, you know, I'm kind of thankful that at the time that I didn't join the team, because to be honest, when Moose left, I got to hire new people, right? And so I got the opportunity to, this is where I found, you know, Ninja, and I found Bobby, right? So Bobby was awesome. I'm so thankful for her brilliance. Like, just, I hired her because I'm like, man, she's just got such an amazing, kind heart. And I love that she would just dive in with both feet and hands and just go and do whatever. Something needs to get done, no problem. She'd go and do it. And yeah, it was awesome. She's just so great. Such a great hire. And yeah, like it was a funny thing because I always felt like, for me, I joined Club Penguin I never really felt like the game was mine. I always felt like it was my responsibility instead. So something I always tried to take as like serious dad, so I always treated it like this serious dad job. And so part of that was being parental for like the community, being parental about the product, being parental and protecting the team and trying to empower them to have opportunities to do things, to flex their creative muscles, to do interesting stuff. So yeah, there was a lot of really cool stuff that happened during this time. Like we finally had we had the companion app launch, like I guess the year before. So Sushi Drop. We had we did Puffle Shake was the last video that I'd done with Moose before he left. But then we had started doing other projects, right? So we had the Karjitsu Snow launch, and that was on the new stack so that it could come out on mobile as well as on desktop. And now we had not just localization, but we also had cross-platform to figure out. And so we were running both in parallel. Technically, there were two different products. You had the Flash version of Club Penguin on desktop or on web, and on mobile you had the version built on top of MetaPlace. So you had Penguins in MetaPlace version, which was the mobile app. And so Karjitsu Snow was built on top of the MetaPlace stack. And so that was like first time we'd done a simultaneous launch between both. And yeah, it was a good time. And, I got to kind of take my Beatles anthology head, and we did our first mashup video inspired by the mashups that were being done by YouTube at the time. And also we got Waddle On going for the first time, which was great. So now suddenly this idea that we'd had of the Moose and Polo show evolved into this like really fun ASDF movie inspired like show that a totally separate team in LA was making for us for Penguin. And it was just fun. I was glad we were putting out like cool comedy content. And, Bobby was doing such an amazing job, and Corey too, with the spoiler alert. So that was really meant to inspire the team, give them something amazing to work on. But all this time, like I think between like my burnout, my autism, my stubborn attachment to making a Club Penguin documentary, it just led me to make some really dumb mistakes. Like I remember saying really like just... I challenged superiors in an email in front of a whole bunch of people. Like, this is a dumb thing that, those with autism might do. And, yeah, I just remember, like, saying that, and I was like, I have just made a really critical error. I have cost myself my job. And, I knew that, like, in 2014 was the year that I knew I'm doomed, actually. My time is nigh. I'd been basically training Bobby to just take over, right? So Bobby, in a way, became my replacement. And yeah, it hurts because I think a lot of the team, had built up some disdain for me and my stupidity, my idiotic ADHD-ness. I was also burnt out, so it's all my fault. It's all me. And yeah, so I think I was thankful that at the end, we basically like... Spoiler alert, was kind of like one of the last things I got to kind of really work on. And I'd say like kind of the last one that I'm super proud to have had the privilege to work on was when I flew to the UK. That's sort of my last work trip with Club Penguin. And I flew to the UK and we filmed the Factory Transmedia team animating the Merry Walrus special. Now, whether you like the Merry Walrus special or not, I love the look of the maquettes and all the craft that the team put into, like the team in Manchester, put into making these amazing puppets. And it was really frightening because it's like they were doing snow. And if you think about stop motion or stop frame animation, if anything like is kind of sparkly, you're doing these photographs as something even just moves like a little blow on a microphone, and all of a sudden the shot is ruined. And you basically have to go and redo like a day's worth of work to get like a second of animation back or two, like, not a lot of, not a lot of time. It's a very labor intensive job. And man alive, seeing the migrator in real life, like, as big as like my kitchen, it was massive, this huge ship, and seeing it in real life was so special. I'm like, there's rock opera. Like, it was so cool to see Penguin personified in real life in this totally different way, and having this whole crew like doing computer animation for the Crystal Puffle and doing stop frame over here, and then getting to talk to these people that worked on like amazing films that won Academy Awards. Like, these are amazingly talented people that have made stuff like Shaun and the Sheep and Bob the Builder and some of the big stop frame films, right? So yeah, that was awesome. And I got to have my coffee at my favorite coffee shop in Brighton, Small Batch. Love Small Batch. There's still no coffee shop I like as much as it. But yeah, that was kind of like the last big project I got to work on. And then, I basically am so thankful that, I had this still small voice telling me, I'm like, you're probably going to get laid off, Chris. And, I'd had that voice, but I'd also had some clues from people. So some people gave me some subtext and kind of hinted to the fact that I probably should start looking for work. And so I did. I was looking for work for a while. So, and it felt a little bit weird to be looking for work and then doing the Penguin work. Cause I'm like, does this mean I'm like not as committed? Like, something inside me is like saying, oh, maybe you're not as committed, Chris. But I was so burnt out. I was burnt crispy. Like, it was just running on fumes. And yeah, but sure enough, like I accepted a new position, and this is before I got laid off. Right. So I accepted the new position, and then I leave the room, walk down the street to the coffee shop, and then it's like, oh, Penguin just called. You're supposed to call them back. And sure enough, basically within 15 minutes of accepting a new position, I got laid off. So I got the new job, so I knew I had a new job and was going to have to go and put in my resignation. But now I didn't have to put in my resignation because I got laid off. And so I'm so grateful for my family being able to, like, that continuity of having income coming into my family. One of the greatest blessings of my entire life. And unfortunately, though, because I'd gone right into, I was just burnt out. I'd left Penguin. I was so burnt out. I didn't have any time to recover. So, a year in Penguin years is like dog years. Working at Penguin for 1 year felt like 7. It just felt like so much happened in such a constrained amount of time. I'm so thankful that a lot of the other staff members went and pursued therapy and tried to recover from burnout and just went, hang on, maybe I don't want to do this job. Like, it was really demanding. It was hard. I know that sounds ridiculous because you're like, well, it's a Flash game. But the hardness isn't necessarily like figuring out what party to make. That's the fun and easy stuff. The hard part was, the sort of the meta job of like, do people have the perception that you're valuable or not valuable, and the politics, and when you do big crazy projects and then you've got a whole big outsourced team that has to be kept productive and there's just so much going on. It's just, the human brain kind of just falls apart going, there's so much to do, right? And there's only so many people you can hire. So yeah, but what's also crazy is like, I'm grateful for this, but it led me to the insane decision of starting my own company and literally incorporating. So the year that I left Penguin was the year I started a company. All right. And because I started that company, I got to do all kinds of work on all kinds of different products. I started working with Lance's brother, Chris, and he basically took all the things that he'd learned from making the first few iterations of the chat filter for Club Penguin and applied that to making a more flexible, adaptable, nuanced filter system and classifier that could be used by, and it basically got used by every single one of Club Penguin's competitors. So it was used by Pop Jam, Roblox, Animal Jam, Movie Star Planet, Woo's World, Habbo, like everyone started using Community Sift. And so then indirectly I got to like interface with all these teams that were not the Club Penguin team, right? I got to meet all the folks that were working on stuff that were outside of Penguin. I got to get to know a little bit about Roblox, a little bit about Animal Jam, a little bit of like each of them. And so that was super cool. And yeah, I'm super grateful for that experience. It leads into, 2017, where the inevitable happens and the closure is announced, right? Club Penguin Classic is going to need to close. The reality was on the wall. The writing was on the wall. We'd known it for years. We'd known that Flash is going to get killed off. And rather than trying to do what Newgrounds did, which is what I wish we had have done, which is like support like the development of Ruffle and try and actually mature that product so that it could emulate Flash so that everybody could just keep playing. We went, well, the numbers are going down for the game. And yeah, so I'm no longer there. And I just have to watch from a distance as like people, the community is getting heartbroken, right? And it was so weird and surreal to watch from a distance. Like I was already bummed out that I, didn't get to work. I was kind of looking forward to getting my like 10-year Disney pin. Like there's my 1 year and my 5 year. I kind of wanted to get my 10-year pin. And I wanted to be working at Penguin during the 10th anniversary. So it was bittersweet, but it was even harder being like, oh man, now it's closing. And then just watching Club Penguin Island unfold. Yeah, it was what a crazy time. But if you think about what was happening around that late 2016, 2017 time, this is like some really new, interesting stuff is coming up. Like this is the launch of Stardew Valley, right? Like something that had been happening for like, Eric had been building Stardew Valley for how many years before that, right? Like that game came out right as Penguin was closing. There's something interesting about like there's a spirit that gets carried across from Club Penguin out into what is now kind of being known as Cozy. But we don't get there yet. 2017 is interesting because Penguin closes. Obviously, there's a little bit of a pause. And that's where, like, okay, the controversy is, but this is where private servers really take off. Right? So this is where, Club Penguin Online comes out, Club Penguin Rewritten comes out, and suddenly, there's all this momentum around people who are like, hang on, it's closing. I don't want it to close. I want to play the game that I grew up with. I don't want to play this new Club Penguin. I want to play the one that I love and know. There's a lot of Penguin Island felt like it was totally different. Like it was trying to be different from Club Penguin Classic, which personally, as someone who's like deeply interested, again, in video game history and preservation, right? This is right around the same time where the Video Game History Foundation starts to form, right? There's a whole growing movement of video game history preservation going on. And, this is like, well, we should preserve this, right? This should be there. And, I'm so grateful that the community of people that are really like true fans who love Club Penguin and want to see it going, right? That's what most of the private servers represent, the wide majority. It's true fans like yourselves who love Penguin and want to see it alive. The rub is that you don't necessarily know who someone is. So then you could have some, what they call a bad actor, who is going out there and running a private server as some sort of front to do something much more nefarious. And that is utterly heartbreaking to see what happened and seeing that becomes the story of Penguin on YouTube since, right? And it's like, that is the most heartbreaking part of it, right? And so it's actually just kind of nicer, almost like, I mentally have to take a clean break from this. Like, it's like, okay, this is just messy. But, the cool thing is you look at 2018, this is where it's like, yeah, Club Penguin Island is running. But what I think Club Penguin Island should have been is what Club Penguin 3D was. Like, let's face it. The fans who were working on Club Penguin 3D or CP3D, it's like, it still has the same issue of like, well, technically the IP is not owned by you or by me. It's owned by Disney, right? They own it. They own the Porsche. They own the car. It's their car. If they want to keep it in the garage and never use it, it's up to them. I don't like it either, right? I think it sucks. I would like it to be out, I think it's a statistical inevitability that Penguin will come back. I don't know when, I don't know how, but the reality is it'll come back. And I hope that it would resemble something more like CP3D, right? This cool thing that was like, oh, what would it look like if, bean counters was 3D, right? What a great idea. I loved it. I mean, it was hard. Playing that in CP3D was tough. But I love it. And I'm thankful that at the sort of the last half of CP Island or Club Penguin Island, I'm thankful that the team got to bring it to desktop and got to iterate, right? And they got to bring some of what made Penguin special back into Club Penguin Island. I think, you know, there's a little bit more of like, let's empower the twins, for example, to bring in some of what they know and bring in their style into Club Penguin Island. And I just am bummed out. I feel like Club Penguin Island didn't have enough of a shot. You know what I mean? Like it came out too late. It should have come out a lot earlier. It should have been running in parallel to Classic, so that both worlds are available. You can log into your account for either. You should keep your friends list. The greatest mistake ever was erasing the friend graph. Like, how silly is that? It's gone. There goes that history. There goes all my history of my Penguin account. But yeah, again, this is just my opinions. So I'm not in control of the company who owns the Club Penguin IP. But yeah, 2018 was this really bittersweet year. But the reality is I was so busy, man. Like this is when, you know, we're going through like pregnancy and, you know, my third daughter is born coming up this time. And there's all this like stuff where we got to go to like emergency because she's got a rare condition. And so, yeah, it was a whole crazy time. So what I'm thankful for around this time as well is all of the stuff that came out of the valley, right? The valley where Kelowna, right? Around Kelowna, I'm thankful that Lance and Lane, who founded Penguin, and Dave, continued to invest in the region, right? This is where my kids live. It's where I live. A lot of people left, right? A lot of people like moved to go work on Fortnite, or moved to go work on Roblox, or moved to go work on LinkedIn, or any of the countless other tech companies that there are penguins in now today. You know, this is a wild and crazy time. Like the after effects are crazy. Like you think about Fortnite, there's so much Club Penguin DNA in Fortnite. I don't know if you've seen that. Like you don't see it because of the shooter aspect, but like the colors, the font, the team, the events, like there's so much Penguin in Fortnite. There's so much Penguin in Roblox. Like Penguin influenced these games. It's crazy. And obviously Penguin was influenced. It wouldn't have been around had it not been influenced by the stuff that came before it, right? But there's other stuff that we started around Kelowna, right? So Adventure Capitalist was taken off, right? So it'd been years of Adventure Capitalist is, you know, created by Cody and Tristan and the rest of the Hyper Hippo team. Like that's going on. You had Player, which was like this contest platform. All this time, by the way, UBC in the region, which is the University of British Columbia, was growing and growing and growing in the valley. More and more people were choosing to, instead of, you know, moving from China, Japan, Europe to go to university at, you know, UBC in Vancouver, people would go, well, I could get the same accreditation by going to Kelowna, but it's cheaper cost of living. So you would have a lot of folks coming in here, and it just totally increased the level of diversity in the region. Yeah, it was super cool. And this is also just before pandemic, right? So 2019, we're coming in here, and like this is the time when Box Critters comes out, right? You finally have Box Critters to go, hey, look, you could build a virtual world today in the browser. Look at what Lance did. You know, it's kind of almost on a dare, as I understand it, right? He could better to explain this to me, but basically someone said, well, you could never run, you know, Penguin in HTML5. That would be too much. And he went, oh yeah, give me a couple weeks. And of course he runs off, builds it. He loves a challenge, right? So there he goes, and he starts it. That's awesome. And this was also the year I'm like, you know, I should make fun of like, you know, what I used to do on Penguin. We should make fun of how silly it all was. So that's when I bought like clubpartyparrot.com. I was like, oh, I should do like a fake newspaper and make fun of how silly it all was. But there was also all these cool fan projects like Toonkins. I don't know if anybody remembers this one, but that was the beginnings of Club Penguin fans making their own games, right? And there's all these talented people in the community. This is where like the next wave shows up, right? This is the beginning, just before the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, this is what happens, right? So yeah, this leads into 2020. I'm working on doing all this contract work through my company, more than I can possibly take on. But I got to meet all kinds of new people, like Shasko and Lethos, who I met. Both of them, they're like down in Ecuador. I didn't meet them during my Penguin time. I met them, you know, contracting for What the Fest. I love all the work, and we were inspired by a bunch of the Penguin work. And so asked Lethos to work on like this robot avatar system. We had a robot that you could dress up. And it's just, you know, the Penguin influence just kept coming up for all of us. But this is also because of the pandemic and everyone's stressed out of their heads and they're stuck inside and people are not allowed to leave their houses, right? It's this time of great uncertainty and everybody's just freaking out. This is what I'm so thankful for, is like, this was the emergence of this word that I'd not known, like it didn't exist before. I was always looking for a word to describe the kind of games I love. And this word cozy showed up during the pandemic, right? And then just the timing of Animal Crossing New Horizons, holy smokes, like that. And then people were looking for more games kind of like that, and they're like, well, what about Stardew? So now suddenly Stardew goes and it does this huge extra growth. And then because people start making content about it, because there's nothing else to do, might as well make videos about it, all these new YouTubers show up, and suddenly you've got a whole new swath of content creators or influencers, whatever you want to say, of creative people making content about this style of game where it's like low stress, it's slower pace. It's not as much about reflexes. It's more just like the brain, and it's pleasant and it's kind, and you can see how much DNA of Penguin is in that. But it's not really fair to say that Penguin led to that, because Animal Crossing was around in 2000, right? Right around the time when Club Penguin and Experimental Penguins was first being, you know, coming out of the ether, right? The muse had brought it. This answer to prayer was emerging. So yeah, and then the wild thing is, like, I think it was around this time, I was like, you know what? I should just, like, I was just like, I'd tweet about Penguin stuff occasionally. And then people that I knew was like, oh, you just tweet about Penguin all the time. It's not really for me, right? So I was getting feedback from people that they're like, they didn't want to hear about Penguin, but then I got feedback from other people that they wanted more Penguin content. Because I'm like, well, I should just start a new Twitter account for it or whatever. So I'm kind of thankful that I did that, and I started it. I started trying to just celebrate the history. That was all I was trying to do, is go, okay, this is stuff that people love. Let's make it community driven. Like, what do you want to hear about? I'll do polls, and I'll post about like weird, little interesting, fun nuggets of Club Penguin's history, but also just virtual worlds in general. And I would actually argue it's not just virtual worlds, it's bigger than that. It's cozy. I actually think that virtual worlds are cozy games. But anyways, like, if you look at that kind of what's happened, man, this was such an awesome time, because basically the account was growing, and I was like, well, as a gesture of gratitude, I want to do something to say thank you, right? I don't mean any ulterior motive. I was just like, I'll draw a stupid, like, silly, this party parrot. I'll draw the party parrot with whatever outfit you want. Just fill out this Airtable form, and I'll go and draw it myself, right? I totally intended I was going to draw them all myself and sit down with the tablet and I figured, because the art style is so, like, non-art, I was like, I can do that, right? But then I got more requests than I had Twitter followers, and I was like, oh man, I'm never going to get through all this. So that's when I reached out to Chili One, and I said, hey, Chili, would you be willing to, like, help draw some parrots? I know this is a crazy thing. We haven't talked for a little while, but how do you feel about doing this, right? And, you know, Chili, as an example, to me, you know, Chili, Tech 70, these are people that were like super loyal and always there, and always came to these like community meetups when I'd host stuff, and they were so supportive for so many years. Like, they'd put in the time. Midnight Aurora, all these people had been around for years. And so I wanted to offer, like, can I offer an opportunity for these different people who've been so loyal, such loyal, like, fans. I don't like the word fans, but I don't have a better word for it. But like Club Penguin fans, who are talented people of their own. Like, they're young people, and I want to give them a chance to, like, do stuff. And so that's where this kind of like Airtable form with all these requests kind of emerged into, well, maybe we could like make a world from this. At the time, there was just like a prototype that Lance Arsnale was experimenting with the awesome team at Skyview, which is like this space world, right? And so I was like, can we make a spaceship? And he just was exploring an idea, right? And so they had the beginnings of something where you could chat, walk around, and it was all 3D. So that's kind of like, well, hey, could we take this and like start building Party Pair with it, right? And that idea started to emerge right at the beginning of the next year. I think it's 2022. I'm losing track of time, but it was a pretty quick blitz. Like, we worked really fast and aggressively. So 2022 was really like, okay, I wanted Party Para to be like this reflection of Penguin. Like, if Penguin's daytime and this is nighttime, it's almost like this alternate reality where, in parallel to Club Penguin existing, there was this other world in another dimension, because we had always introduced these like this concept of other lands. I'll give you like a lore hint about Party Pair. Is like, remember the time that there was this like weird, magically, mysteriously growing plant that Rockhopper had picked up on an island he visited, right? I liked the idea that there was something else out there, right? That the Penguin universe, there was continuity across stuff, because some of the stuff I'm most inspired by, again, going back to Marvel Comics, you have these like different like stories, right? You have the Daredevil universe, the Spider-Man universe, the X-Men universe, Fantastic Four, and then you have these overlaps, right? Where Spider-Man appears in Fantastic Four, and there's little crossover overlaps over history. So I love the idea of doing something like that. It's like, oh, maybe we could like tease out the stuff we've talked about doing for many, many years. Like, we were talking about doing crossovers to other worlds eons ago. Like, there's Project Imagination, there's all this stuff that we were making way back, like 2009, 2008, 2009, right? This is not new concept. It's just that now we're doing it on our own, right? So this is new, it has to be its own, it has to be respectful. And what was super inspiring about all these parrots that we'd gotten for requests is, rather than them all being like, oh, make this outfit and Penguin that I used to have, like, yeah, we got some of those, but we also got a whole bunch of like totally original, like really interesting requests from the community. And so me being like, heavily biased towards the community, I was like, okay, I want to do what it takes to get through those outfits. Let's go. And so it's like just this march, right? But we also don't have infinite resources. It's not like I can go, let's go hire 300 artists. It's like, no, we're basically going to have like one artist, maybe two, working on this. It's not, we don't have infinite resources. So, and we got through a whole whack of them. Like, there was like 1,000 outfits that we got through for them, but there's still like 6,500 outfits to get through still in the future. But I love that. What I love is that it's sort of emerged out of the community, right? And so my goal all the way along was like, okay, if the Club Penguin community was driving a new world, what would they want to do? And so I wanted to make everything like a poll. It's like, what do we call the thing? Is it a spiritual successor? Is it a sequel? Is it something else? What color sky should we do? Should it be blue or should it be purple? Everything was a poll, right? And so we just rushed to get that prototype out the door. We took so long on the first game that we were building from scratch ourselves, which was was Connexcellent. And we took so long on this 4-player like Connect 4 game that it was like, oh man, we don't have much time left. We have no time to put in anything else. There's nothing else to do in the game other than chat. So that's when we like made the pretty hasty decision. It was like, well, we need to like go and buy some game templates, right? So you'll see games that are like mechanically, they're the same as like if you go into like a ticket arcade, Dave & Buster's or Chuck E. Cheese, right? And so these games are not very original. They're like, you've seen them everywhere. They're a little bit tchotchke. What was really sad is Party Parrot like kind of got judged based on that. It was like, well, Party Parrot's not very good because you got these like tchotchke games. It's like, well, no, those were just meant to like test, can we load like a web view, right? Can we have a web game that loads into a Unity game, right? Because if we can do that, then we can get around the whole need to go through Apple approvals and Google approvals to launch new updates, right? So our thinking was, hey, we can go and launch new games. The problem is like the performance it's not very good, right? So, but yeah, anyways, that was something that came out of 2022. But also like kind of 2023 to 2024, this is this really weird new arc that I never saw coming. I was just really curious because I kept seeing in the community so many people saying, I've got ADHD, I've got autism, blah, 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 I'm neurodivergent. I just keep seeing more and more and more people talking about this. And I was like, well, that's curious. I wonder how people get assessed for ADHD, right? So I went and I took the test just to find out, like, what's the process? I wanted to learn about it. I wanted to understand the process. Yeah, no, it turns out I've got ADHD. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I guess the reason I'm recognizing it is because I've got that. And so, honestly, 2023 to 2024 was really hard. Like, I've been super tired. It's been quite a slog. We didn't really get as far as I wanted us to, or as we didn't do as well as I wanted to with Parrot. Like, I think we made a bunch of like little mistakes that add up to like, it's just not there yet. So yeah, it's cool now for 2025. I'm so thankful that we had that experience, but I'm also thankful that like, Party Parrot, I went in, I think one of my biggest mistakes was I wanted to make sure that we got like COPA compliance right away, so that if a child went to sign up or a teen went to sign up, it didn't matter. Like, it was just like, it'll sort itself out, right? Then we can kind of later go, okay, this is the adult group, and then the adults can chat to adults, the teens can chat to teens, and the kids can chat to kids. But then, it became this whole schmoz with age verification. Apparently just really bothers a lot of people. But the reality is it's coming everywhere. Like, age verification is an inevitable reality. My hope is that it'll just be kind of automated. You do it once with like the government or plan B would be like Google and Apple, and then you've already done it, and you've done it once, and then anytime you go and authenticate with one of those giant companies, it's already done. You're not like worried about like, oh no, what if my ID gets leaked to the internet or whatever. Anyways, this is the whole thing about age verification. I'm thankful that we learned that in these last few years, but I'm also thankful to kind of take a break. So basically what we did this year was just we closed the Party Parrot test. So we had it open for probably a little too long. We had it open, got the feedback. We've got enough feedback, and we basically have, like, Lance and I have been planning and Scott been planning for quite a while. And I am so thankful. Like, the plan is so exciting. And what's so super exciting at the core of it all is that it's kind of basically my youngest daughter was like, why don't you just do this? And it's like, hang on. I shared that with Lance, and he's like, yeah, wait a second. And then shared with Scott, and he's like, yeah. So then we're like, hey, hang on. We know what we want to do next. It's going back to, it's like, we want to build like the world builder. We want to make the ability for you as a community to make your own worlds, right? It was like, I said to Lance in 2018, 2019, I was like, the best possible like follow-up you could do to Club Penguin is a Club Penguin maker. And that's kind of what we're doing. That's actually what Hideaway is. Party Parrot was really just meant to be an example world in Hideaway, right? Built with the Hideaway tools. So what we're doing in this next bit while Parrot is closed is, I'm going to pause it. Lance is stepping in to focus on the builder, right? We've already met a whole bunch. I'll meet with him occasionally. I've got a huge lore document planned for the story arc of like the Party Parrot story. Like, basically I've planned it as like a master story that you would be able to play through beginning to end. Kind of like how if you play a console game, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end of the story. And then you can continue playing in the like new game plus or the after game. Post game. So that's what I have planned for Party Parrot for you. And I'm doing it a little bit differently. That one I wanted to be a surprise, because one of the criticisms I got was there's not really any surprise. Like, we were so transparent and everything was a poll that nothing was really a surprise about what's coming next. So basically Party Parrot, we've closed it and we put it in the fridge, which is really exciting because I get to take a little break and we get to talk about like virtual worlds and what we love about them. And I can chat with you guys. I'm not worried about, like, now that we've done all this whole age verification test, etc., you're all adults. That's great. like, we know that we can have adult, grown-up conversations about the history of Penguin and game design and what we love the most, which is awesome. And then also, I get to make one of the other games that I've been stewing on for quite a long time. So I'll first mention it here. It's a game that takes place in Kelowna, in studios inspired by the Club Penguin offices. So basically, I've had this thing about, I love the fourth wall, I love behind the scenes, and I've always wanted to have an experience where you can play through a game where you're making games. So to me, I love like Game Dev Story, for example, one of my favorites. That's kind of the source inspiration. Between that and actually the game that has been just rocked my world is Fields of Mystria. There's my number one game recommendation to everybody. I think it's one of the greatest games to come out in eons. It's simple, it's fun, it's beautiful art style. Absolutely adore it. Yeah, probably one of my favorite games of all time, actually. And again, if you're into like competition or whatever, that game's not for you, right? But yeah, so I'm working on this new game, and it's basically named after a name that people came up with for Kelowna back when Experimental Penguins was happening, and Lance was part of this group. So the game is going to be called Silicon Vineyard. And that's this name because, you know, in Kelowna, there's all these grapes and fruit trees and apples and orchards. And this is the birthplace of Club Penguin, where so many people met. I got to meet so many amazing people. I got to meet and work with this amazing community of people. And so this is really meant to be my other tribute to Club Penguin's legacy. So there we go. I'm sorry that it was a bit long and rambly. I hope it was interesting. If it wasn't interesting, thanks for sticking around. What I would love to hear from you guys, authentically, if you got to the end of this video, is just leave a comment below with what you're most grateful for about Penguin. Make a video about what you're most grateful for. Like, put the positive energy back out there into the world. Stop making more drama llama content about the downfall of Club Penguin. There's way too much good in Club Penguin's history to deserve that treatment, right? Like, let's not just be idiot sheep following what the YouTube algorithm rewards, which is hatred and spewing out drama. Let's just put out something that's nice about what we actually liked. And yeah, you can be critical, it's fine. But don't make it like don't make clickbait. You know what I mean? Make something where you just genuinely care. And share what you love. I'd love to hear your favorite moments in Penguin history. To be honest, looking at fan art and seeing your drawings of not just fan art, but just your drawings of your own OCs, your own original characters. I love that stuff because as a kid, I would have wanted that. I would have wanted to, like, you know, if the creators of Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, if I could just like chat with them on social. Oh man, as a kid, I would have been like so into that. So super into like Spider-Man. Like if I could chat to the artist who worked on Spider-Man, or, you know, the writer who wrote the script for Final Fantasy VI. Like, I would love that when I was a kid. So what I've always tried to do is be that for the community. So I'm sorry that I've made mistakes along the way, and, you know, I've been my sarcastic music journalist sometimes. It just comes out. It's autism. Interesting thing about autism is that people who do not have autism are much more likely to dislike someone who has autism, statistically. It's been proven medically. So I think I end up running into that a lot, where people are just don't like what I have to say or how I say it because they're looking for a subtext. I don't have that subtext. Like, what I say is what I say. It's all there, right? So anyways, I'm super grateful that you watched this video and participated, and thanks to everyone who played Penguin and gave me the opportunity to work on something so cool. And I'm so grateful that, like, Lance and Lane put in so much heart and energy into what they were doing and fought so hard for it. I think there's so many ways where Lane doesn't get the recognition he deserves for some of his positive stuff. And I feel the same about Lance. I think there's so many ways where Lance isn't, you know, people just don't see just how much of that man's heart is in it. And Chris Hendricks, I could just go on and on and on, so I won't. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you got suggestions for other videos, feel free. Just tell me in the comments. Waddle on.